My sister-in-law shoved me down the stairs and my brother said, "You should have just given us the money." All because I refused to pay off their debt. I went to my parents for help and collapsed on the porch. What happened next left everyone in shock. I, 32M, never thought my own blood would be the one to put me in the hospital. It started 3 weeks ago when my brother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I was working from home, finishing up a project proposal when I heard the aggressive knocking. The moment I opened the door, I could see the desperation in his eyes. He didn't even bother with small talk, just launched straight into asking if we could talk about something important. I let him in, offered coffee, the usual brotherly routine. But the tension rolling off him made the air thick. He sat at my kitchen table, fidgeting with his phone, before finally telling me he needed money. Not a small amount either. $45,000. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. He explained that he and his wife had made some bad investments, got caught up in a pyramid scheme that promised quick returns, and now they were drowning in debt. Creditors were calling daily, threatening legal action. They'd already maxed out their credit cards trying to dig themselves out. He looked at me with this pleading expression and said I was their last hope. That family helps family. I took a long breath before responding. I'd worked hard for my money, spent years building my career as a software engineer, living below my means, saving aggressively. The money I had wasn't just sitting around. It was earmarked for a down payment on a house, something I'd been planning for years. I told him I couldn't just hand over that kind of cash, that it would derail my own future. His face changed then. The desperation morphed into something uglier. He asked if I was really going to let them lose everything over money. I tried to explain it wasn't that simple, that I had my own life to build, but he wasn't hearing it. He left angry, slamming my door hard enough to rattle the frame. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 days later, his wife started calling. Text messages flooded my phone at all hours. She painted vivid pictures of their impending doom, losing their house, ruining their credit forever, destroying their future. She tried guilt, then anger, then back to guilt. I stopped responding after the 10th message. Then she showed up at my workplace. Security had to escort her out after she caused a scene in the lobby, shouting about how I was abandoning family in their time of need. My brother called that night, angrier than before. He said his wife was having panic attacks, that the stress was destroying their marriage, and it was my fault for being selfish. I told him I wasn't responsible for their financial decisions and that they needed to find another solution. He hung up on me. The harassment continued for another week. Phone calls, messages, even emails. My sister-in-law created a fake email account to send me lengthy essays about family loyalty and biblical obligations. I blocked every avenue of contact I could find, but they always found new ways to reach me. Then came last Tuesday. I'd just gotten home from the gym around 7 in the evening. I was sweaty, tired, looking forward to a shower and some mindless TV. As I climbed the stairs to my third-floor apartment, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast footsteps. Before I could turn around, I felt hands on my back, a hard, violent shove that sent me flying forward. Time stretched in that moment. I remembered thinking how stupid it was that my life might end on a stairwell. My hands shot out instinctively, trying to catch myself, but I was already tumbling. My shoulder hit first, then my head cracked against the corner of a step. Pain exploded through my skull. I kept rolling, my body a rag doll bouncing down concrete stairs. I landed at the bottom in a heap, my vision swimming with stars and darkness. Through the haze, I heard her voice. My sister-in-law was standing at the top of the stairs, breathing hard, her face twisted with rage. She shouted down at me that I'd brought this on myself, that I could have prevented all of this. My brother appeared beside her. For a moment, I thought he'd be horrified, that he'd rush down to help me. Instead, he looked at me with cold eyes and said I should have just given them the money. Those words cut deeper than any physical injury. He wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders, and they walked away, leaving me bleeding on the floor. I don't know how long I lay there. Could have been minutes, could have been longer. Eventually, I managed to pull myself up, though my left arm wasn't responding right and my head felt like it was splitting open. I could barely walk. Each step sent waves of agony through my body. I knew I needed help, but the thought of calling an ambulance, dealing with police reports and questions, it felt overwhelming in that moment. I had one thought: get to Mom and Dad. They lived 40 minutes away, but I was in no condition to drive. I called a rideshare, nearly passing out twice while waiting for it to arrive. The driver kept asking if I needed a hospital. I told him I just needed to get to my parents' house. He looked skeptical, but drove. The ride was a blur of pain and consciousness fading in and out. I kept replaying the moment, the hands on my back, the fall, my brother's cold dismissal. My own brother. The person I'd grown up with, shared a room with for 15 years, protected from bullies in middle school. That brother had watched his wife nearly kill me and said I deserved it. When we finally arrived at my parents' house, I practically fell out of the car. The driver asked again if he should call 911. I waved him off and stumbled toward the front porch. My vision was tunneling, dark edges creeping in. I made it to the front door and managed to knock, but my legs gave out. I collapsed right there on their porch, my cheek pressed against the welcome mat my mother had bought last Christmas. I heard the door open, heard my mother's scream. My father's voice, sharp with panic, calling my name. Hands on me, gentle but urgent. My mother was crying, asking what happened, who did this. I tried to tell them, but the words came out slurred and wrong. Everything was spinning. The last thing I remembered before losing consciousness was my father on the phone with emergency services, his voice shaking in a way I'd never heard before. Update 1. I woke up in the hospital 36 hours later. The doctors told me I had a severe concussion, a fractured left wrist, 3 cracked ribs, and multiple contusions. I was lucky, they said. The head injury could have been much worse. A few more inches, and I might have cracked my skull open completely or broken my neck. I'd need weeks of recovery, physical therapy for the wrist, and monitoring for any delayed complications from the concussion. My parents were there when I woke up, both looking like they'd aged 10 years overnight. My mother kept touching my face gently, as if confirming I was real. My father stood at the foot of the bed, his jaw clenched tight, that vein in his forehead throbbing the way it did when he was furious but trying to control it. They wanted to know everything. So I told them. I walked them through the loan request, the harassment, the attack. I watched my mother's face crumble when I described my brother's reaction. My father's hands balled into fists when I explained how they just walked away. My mother asked if I was sure about what happened, if maybe I'd misunderstood the situation in my injured state. That hurt almost as much as the fall. But I understood. She was a mother trying to reconcile the son she'd raised with the monster I was describing. I told her I was certain. I remembered every detail with crystal clarity. My father left the room without a word. I learned later he'd called my brother immediately, demanding he come to the hospital. My brother refused. He claimed I was lying, that I'd probably gotten drunk and fallen down my own stairs, and now I was trying to blame them to avoid looking foolish. He said if I wanted to play victim, I could do it without involving him. The police came next. A detective and a uniformed officer who took my statement while I was still hooked up to various monitors. I told them everything. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said yes without hesitation. The detective explained the process. They'd investigate, interview my brother and his wife, check for any security camera footage in my building. It would take time, but they'd pursue it. My parents hired a lawyer. A good one, the kind who'd handled several high-profile cases in our city. She visited me the next day, all business in her sharp suit and sharper questions. She explained that we had a strong case for assault and battery, possibly even attempted murder given the severity and premeditation. The stairwell had cameras, she'd already confirmed. We had evidence. When I was released from the hospital 4 days later, I went to stay with my parents. I couldn't manage stairs yet, and my apartment suddenly felt dangerous, tainted. My childhood bedroom had been converted into a home office, but my mother set up the guest room for me, fluffing pillows and bringing me water every hour like I was 10 years old again. The first week back was brutal. The physical pain was manageable with medication, but the emotional toll was crushing. I kept thinking about my brother, about how we used to be close. We drifted apart over the years as life pulled us in different directions, but I never imagined it would end like this. I grieved for the relationship we'd had, for the brother I thought I knew. My phone started buzzing with messages from extended family. Word had spread. Aunts and uncles reached out, some offering support, others demanding to know what really happened. My brother had apparently been spinning his own version of events, that I'd attacked his wife when she came to reason with me, that I fell during the altercation, and now I was lying to cover up my own violence. The accusation was so absurd it would have been funny if it weren't destroying my family. Some relatives believed him. Others sat on the fence, preaching forgiveness and family unity as if I hadn't nearly died. A few, thankfully, saw through the lies and reached out with genuine concern. The detective called with an update. They'd found the security footage. It showed my sister-in-law following me into the building, waiting until I was on the stairs, then rushing up behind me. The camera angle perfectly captured the moment she shoved me with both hands. It also caught my brother entering shortly after, their conversation at the top of the stairs, and them leaving together while I lay motionless at the bottom. The evidence was damning. Arrest warrants were issued. Update 2. My brother and his wife were arrested on a Thursday morning. I wasn't there to see it, but my father was. He'd gone to their house, against my mother's wishes and my lawyer's advice, to confront them one last time before the police arrived. He later told me he'd wanted to look his son in the eye and understand how he could have become this person. According to my father, my brother answered the door in pajama pants and an old college t-shirt, clearly not expecting company. When he saw Dad, his face went pale. He tried to close the door, but my father pushed his way inside. They argued in the foyer, my father demanding answers, my brother deflecting and making excuses. His wife emerged from upstairs, and that's when things escalated. She started screaming at my father, calling him a terrible parent for raising such a selfish son, meaning me. She blamed their financial problems on my father's poor example of money management, on the family's lack of support, on everything except their own decisions. My father, a man who'd worked 2 jobs to put both his sons through college debt-free, just stood there and took it until she made the mistake of saying I deserved what happened. That's when my father's composure broke. He told her she was no longer his daughter-in-law, that she was a criminal who'd tried to murder his son, and that he hoped she rotted in prison. He turned to my brother and said something that I still can't think about without tearing up. He told him that he'd lost a son that day on the stairs, and it wasn't me. The police arrived 10 minutes later. 2 squad cars for officers. My brother and his wife were read their rights and taken away in handcuffs. Neighbors stood on their lawns watching. It was the kind of scene that would fuel gossip for months. The charges were serious: assault and battery with serious bodily injury, conspiracy to commit assault, and because it happened in the stairwell of my building where other residents could have been endangered, additional reckless endangerment charges. The prosecutor my lawyer connected us with was building a strong case. With the video evidence, medical records, and documented history of harassment, conviction seemed certain. But then my brother's lawyer reached out to mine with a proposal. They wanted to negotiate a plea deal. In exchange for pleading guilty to reduced charges, they'd accept a lesser sentence and agree to a restraining order. They'd also agree to pay restitution for my medical bills and damages. My lawyer presented the offer to me. She explained that going to trial could take months, would be emotionally exhausting, and while we'd likely win, there were never guarantees with juries. A plea deal would give us certainty, get me compensation faster, and still result in consequences for them. I asked what the reduced sentence would be. 18 months for her, 12 months for him, with the possibility of parole after serving 2/3 of the sentence. Plus probation, community service, and the restraining order would be permanent. They'd also have felony records, which would impact their employment, housing, and lives forever. Part of me wanted to see them suffer through a trial, to have every detail of their cruelty exposed in open court. But another part of me was just tired. Tired of the anger, the stress, the constant rehashing of trauma. I wanted to move forward with my life. I accepted the plea deal. The hearing was brief. My brother and his wife stood before the judge, heads down, as their crimes were read into the record. They pleaded guilty. The judge accepted the plea and scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. I attended that hearing too, sitting in the gallery with my parents on one side and empty space on the other where my brother's family might have sat if he hadn't alienated everyone. The judge was not sympathetic. Before announcing the sentence, she addressed my brother and his wife directly. She said that family bonds were sacred, that to violate them with violence was particularly heinous. She noted the premeditation, the lack of remorse, and the attempt to blame the victim. Then she sentenced them both to the maximum time allowed under the plea agreement and added enhanced restitution requirements. My brother finally looked at me then. Across the courtroom, our eyes met. I searched his face for something: regret, apology, recognition of what he'd destroyed. I saw nothing but resentment. He blamed me still, even in his moment of judgment. That's when I knew the brother I'd known was truly gone. They were taken into custody immediately. My parents sat silent beside me as our family fractured irreparably in that courtroom. Update 3. 6 months have passed since the sentencing. I've mostly physically recovered, though my wrist still aches when it rains and I get occasional headaches that the neurologist says may be permanent effects of the concussion. I completed physical therapy and slowly rebuilt my strength. The visible scars faded, but the invisible ones run deeper. My parents struggled with what happened in ways I hadn't anticipated. My mother went through a period of deep depression, blaming herself for somehow failing as a parent. She went to therapy, which helped, but there's a sadness in her eyes now that wasn't there before. My father threw himself into helping me recover, channeling his pain into action, helping me move to a new apartment with better security, accompanying me to medical appointments, even helping me research trauma therapists. I did start therapy. Turns out, having your family try to kill you leaves some psychological marks. I dealt with nightmares, hypervigilance around stairs, and a deep betrayal trauma that affected how I trusted people. My therapist helped me understand that what I was feeling was normal given the circumstances, and that healing wasn't linear. The financial fallout for my brother and his wife was catastrophic. The felony convictions meant my brother lost his job. His wife had been unemployed already, and now with a criminal record, employment prospects were grim. The restitution payments, which totaled over $60,000 including my medical bills, therapy costs, lost wages, and damages, loomed over them. Their house went into foreclosure while they were incarcerated. Their car was repossessed. The debt they'd tried to force me to pay had multiplied exponentially. Some extended family members reached out to me with apologies once the full truth became undeniable. Others never did, choosing instead to quietly distance themselves from the whole mess. A few still believed my brother's lies, despite video evidence and guilty pleas. I learned a valuable lesson about how people will believe what they want to believe, regardless of facts. I eventually moved forward with buying my house. The down payment I protected was still intact, and ironically, the restitution payments would eventually reimburse most of what the attack had cost me. It felt like a strange victory. I'd been attacked for refusing to give up my future, and now I was building that future anyway, while they paid the price for their choices. The hardest part was accepting that my brother and I would never reconcile. My therapist said I needed to grieve that relationship, to acknowledge the death of what was, and let go of what could never be. I'm still working on that. Sometimes I miss him. Not the person who pushed me down the stairs, but the kid who used to build blanket forts with me, who taught me to ride a bike, who called me when he got his first job to share the excitement. That person is gone. Maybe he never really existed the way I remembered. Maybe people show you who they really are when they're desperate, and desperation just revealed what was always there beneath the surface. My parents eventually stopped visiting them in prison. My mother tried at first, hoping to reach some understanding or remorse. But after 3 visits where she was met with blame and demands for help with legal appeals, she gave up. My father never went at all. He'd meant what he said. He'd lost a son that day, and it wasn't me. I think about forgiveness sometimes. Whether I should, whether I want to, whether it even matters. My therapist says forgiveness is for me, not for them. That it's about releasing the anger so it doesn't poison my future. But I'm not sure I'm there yet. Maybe I never will be. Maybe that's okay. What I do know is this: I survived. I rebuilt. I refused to let their cruelty derail my life. I'm living in my new house now, a modest 3-bedroom with a home office and a backyard. I adopted a dog, a rescue mutt who alerts me when anyone approaches the door. I'm dating someone new, someone patient and kind who knows my story and doesn't judge the scars it left. My brother and his wife will be released eventually. The restraining order means they can't contact me, but I know the day will come when I might run into them somewhere in the city we all call home. I don't know what I'll feel when that happens. Anger, probably. Sadness, certainly. But also, I hope, indifference. Because the best revenge isn't making them pay. They did that to themselves. The best revenge is building a life so full and good that what they did becomes just a chapter in my story, not the whole book. I'm working on writing that next chapter now, and they're not invited to read it.